When a man wants a woman, his greeting is never accidental. It may look casual on the surface, but psychologically it rarely is. A greeting is one of the first moments where desire leaks out, often unconsciously. Before a man has said anything meaningful, before he has even decided how honest he plans to be, his body and energy have already spoken. This is why the way he greets you matters far more than most people realize. When attraction is present, a man becomes intentional. His attention sharpens, his posture changes, his timing shifts. There is a subtle pause before he speaks, a moment of awareness that wasn't there with others. He may lean in slightly, hold eye contact a fraction longer, or soften his tone without realizing it. These aren't rehearsed behaviors. They are instinctive responses driven by desire. Even men who try to appear indifferent often fail at this stage because the greeting happens before the mask fully comes on. Now, this is where narcissistic dynamics complicate things. A narcissistic man also understands the power of first impressions, but his motivation is different. While a genuinely interested man greets from curiosity and connection, a narcissist greets from strategy. He wants to be remembered. He wants impact. He wants to feel admired. His greeting may be unusually confident, charming, or intense, but it often feels slightly performative, as though he is watching your reaction as much as he is engaging with you. The greeting becomes less about meeting you and more about managing how you see him. The key difference lies in presence. A man who truly wants you is present with you. His attention isn't scattered. He isn't scanning the room or performing for an invisible audience. His greeting feels grounded, focused, and natural. A narcissistic greeting, on the other hand, often carries an edge, an urgency to impress, or a subtle need for control. It can feel exciting, but not necessarily safe. And that distinction matters. It's also important to understand that greetings set the emotional tone. When a man wants a woman, his greeting is a form of investment. It signals, "You matter to me." But when that signal is inconsistent, warm one day, distant the next, it creates confusion. Narcissistic men often exploit this, using greetings as a lever to pull you closer or push you away, depending on what feeds their ego in the moment. This is often where mixed signals begin, long before deeper emotional involvement. The mistake many people make is dismissing greetings as insignificant. They tell themselves they're reading too much into it. But the truth is, humans communicate intent in the smallest moments. The greeting is a psychological doorway. It shows whether a man is oriented toward connection or control, curiosity or validation, sincerity or performance. So the next time a man greets you, don't just listen to his words, notice his presence. Notice how his energy meets yours. Ask yourself whether the greeting feels intentional or strategic, grounded or performative. Because when you learn to read this moment clearly, you stop guessing. And when you stop guessing, you stop giving your emotional energy to ambiguity. Real desire doesn't arrive casually, and the sooner you recognize that, the sooner you begin choosing clarity over confusion. Once you begin to notice that greetings are rarely neutral, the next layer of awareness is understanding why they feel the way they do. This is where the difference between emotional investment and performative attention becomes crucial. On the surface, both can look similar. Both can involve enthusiasm, confidence, even warmth, but underneath, they are driven by very different motivations. And if you don't learn to tell them apart, it's easy to mistake charm for genuine interest. A man who is emotionally invested greets you from a place of curiosity and care. He is oriented toward you, not toward the effect he's having. His attention feels steady, not rushed. There's no urgency to impress, no need to dominate the moment. Even if he's confident, that confidence is quiet. It doesn't demand validation. It simply exists. His greeting feels like an invitation rather than a performance, and that's because his interest isn't something he's trying to manufacture. It's already there. Performative attention, on the other hand, is about impact. A narcissistic man often greets in a way that creates a reaction. He wants to be memorable. He wants to feel wanted. He wants to confirm his power in the interaction. So his greeting may feel unusually intense, charismatic, or emotionally charged right from the start. But if you pay attention, the focus subtly shifts back to him. He watches how you respond. He measures your reaction. The moment becomes less about connection and more about validation. This is why performative attention can be so confusing. It often feels exciting. It creates a spark. But excitement is not the same as emotional safety or depth. Emotional investment feels grounding. Performative attention feels stimulating but unstable. One nourishes connection, the other feeds the ego. And while both can feel flattering, only one leads to consistency over time. Another key difference lies in how the greeting fits into the broader pattern of behavior. When a man is emotionally invested, his warmth doesn't disappear once the moment passes. His interest carries forward. It shows up in follow-up, effort, and respect for your time and boundaries. A narcissistic man's attention, however, is often situational. He may greet you with intensity one day and emotional distance the next. This inconsistency isn't accidental. It's part of how he maintains control and keeps you seeking clarity. What's important here is not to judge the greeting in isolation, but to observe how it aligns with everything else. Does his attention feel stable, or does it spike and vanish? Does his interest grow deeper with time, or does it stay on the surface, fueled by novelty and ego? Emotional investment builds. Performative attention fluctuates. Philosophically, this distinction asks you to shift your focus from how something feels in the moment to what it produces over time. Does this interaction leave you feeling calmer and clearer, or more anxious and uncertain? Does it strengthen your sense of self, or subtly make you feel like you need to earn his attention? Your emotional state after the interaction is often more revealing than the interaction itself. So when a man greets you with charm or intensity, pause. Ask yourself not, was that exciting, but was that real? Real interest doesn't need to impress you. It wants to know you. And the moment you start valuing emotional consistency over emotional stimulation, you stop being pulled into performances and start choosing connections that can actually sustain you. Once you understand the difference between genuine interest and performative attention, the next place to look is not at what a man says, but at what his body reveals. Words are chosen, body language is exposed, and nowhere is this more evident than in the way a man physically orients himself toward you when he greets you. Long before commitment, long before clarity, his body is already telling the truth. When a man truly wants a woman, his body leans toward connection. His attention is undivided. His posture opens rather than shields. He faces you fully, not at an angle, not halfway turned as though he's ready to leave. His eye contact isn't exaggerated or forced. It's steady, comfortable, present. These signals are subtle, but they create a feeling of being acknowledged rather than assessed. You don't feel like you're being evaluated. You feel like you're being met. A narcissistic man often mimics the appearance of this, but the difference is in the tension. His body language can feel overly controlled or performative, as though he's aware of himself being watched. He may invade personal space too quickly, lean in too close, or use physical proximity to establish dominance rather than intimacy. Instead of openness, there's an undercurrent of self-focus. He's not responding to, he's executing a version of himself. Another revealing element is pacing. A man who is emotionally grounded moves at a pace that feels natural and attuned to the moment. He adjusts to you. He notices your comfort level. A narcissistic greeting often feels rushed or overwhelming, as though he's trying to fast forward intimacy. This urgency isn't desire, it's insecurity masked as confidence. And when intimacy moves faster than trust, it rarely leads somewhere healthy. Body language also shows up in what happens immediately after the greeting. Does he stay engaged, or does his attention drift? Does he continue the connection, or does the warmth evaporate once he's made his impression? A man who wants you doesn't switch off. His presence continues. A narcissist often disengages once the ego has been fed, leaving you feeling momentarily elevated and then strangely disconnected. The psychological reason this matters is simple. The body cannot sustain false intention for long. Charm can be rehearsed, lines can be memorized, but posture, orientation, and unconscious movement reveal motivation. And when you start watching these patterns instead of listening for reassurance, your clarity sharpens dramatically. There's also a philosophical shift here that's worth noting. When you learn to read body language, you stop outsourcing your understanding of reality to someone else's words. You stop needing explanations. You stop asking, what did he mean? And start asking, what did he show? This shift moves you from confusion into self-trust. And self-trust is the antidote to manipulation. The moment you trust what you observe instead of what you hope, you regain your power. You stop being impressed by surface confidence and start being drawn to grounded presence. So the next time a man greets you, don't analyze his words. Observe his orientation. Is he open or guarded, present or performative, calm or urgent? The body always answers before the mouth does. And when you learn to listen to that language, you stop chasing clarity and start to read greetings more clearly, seeing the intention, the body language, the emotional tone. The deeper question naturally emerges: what is driving this behavior? Because every intentional greeting comes from an internal motivation. And understanding that motivation is where real discernment begins. This is especially important when narcissistic tendencies are involved, because two men can greet you in similar ways while feeling entirely different things inside. When a man genuinely wants a woman, his greeting is an expression of internal alignment. His feelings, intentions, and behavior are moving in the same direction. There's curiosity there. There's respect. There's a quiet desire to connect rather than to impress. He's not trying to manufacture a reaction. He's responding to something real he feels. Psychologically, this kind of greeting comes from emotional availability. He's open enough to allow the moment to be what it is, without forcing it to serve his ego. A narcissistic man, however, is driven by a very different internal state. His greeting is not rooted in connection, but in regulation, regulating his self-image, his sense of power, or his need for validation. He may feel drawn to you, but that attraction is filtered through his need to feel admired, chosen, or in control. So his greeting becomes a tool. It's not about meeting you, it's about managing how he feels about himself in your presence. This is why narcissistic greetings often feel intentional, in a way that's slightly off. There's effort behind them. There's calculation. He may be watching your response closely, adjusting his behavior based on how much attention or affirmation he receives. The greeting isn't an opening, it's a test. And tests, while subtle, are never about intimacy. They're about power dynamics. Understanding this psychological distinction matters because it explains why some greetings feel warm but don't lead anywhere. You sense something, but it never solidifies into consistency. That's because intention rooted in ego cannot sustain emotional investment. It creates moments, not momentum. Genuine desire, on the other hand, naturally seeks continuity. A man who truly wants you doesn't just want the moment to land. He wants the connection to grow. There's also an important philosophical point here about desire versus attachment. Healthy desire is expansive. It's curious, respectful, and patient. Narcissistic attachment is consumptive. It wants reassurance now. It wants intensity without vulnerability. And you can feel the difference even in the smallest interactions. One feels calm and grounding. The other feels charged but unstable. When you start recognizing the motivation behind a greeting, you stop personalizing confusing behavior. You realize that inconsistency isn't about your worth. It's about his internal fragmentation. This awareness is incredibly freeing. It allows you to step out of analysis loops and into observation. Instead of wondering, why is he like this with me? You begin to see this is how he relates to desire itself. And here's the empowering part. Once you understand motivation, you can choose accordingly. You don't have to confront or accuse. You simply respond with discernment. You give more access to those whose intention is grounded and less to those whose attention feels strategic. So the next time a man greets you intentionally, ask yourself one quiet question. Is this coming from connection or from control? That answer will tell you everything you need to know. Because when you stop responding to attention and start responding to intention, you stop getting pulled into confusion and start moving toward clarity, stability, and relationships that are actually capable of growing, recognizing it the moment it arrives. Once you begin to understand intention, what drives a man's greeting from the inside, the next layer becomes impossible to ignore: patterns. Because mixed signals rarely appear out of nowhere. They usually begin quietly, right at the greeting stage. This is where many women feel confusion creeping in, not because they lack intuition, but because they haven't yet learned to trust the early data their experience is giving them. A man who is emotionally available tends to be consistent from the start. His greetings may grow warmer over time, but they don't swing dramatically. You don't feel whiplash. One day he's present, the next he's distant. With narcissistic men, however, greetings often fluctuate. One interaction feels deeply attentive, almost intimate. The next feels rushed, distracted, or oddly cold. This inconsistency is not accidental. It's a reflection of his internal instability and his relationship with validation. Psychologically, narcissistic men use inconsistency as a way to stay in control. When attention is unpredictable, it keeps you thinking, analyzing, and emotionally invested. The greeting becomes a lever. Warmth pulls you in, distance makes you question yourself. And before you realize it, you're no longer responding to him. You're reacting to the uncertainty. This is how mixed signals gain power. What's important to understand is that confusion is not chemistry. Anxiety is not attraction. When a greeting leaves you replaying the moment, wondering what changed or what you did wrong, that's not a sign of depth. It's a sign of emotional imbalance. Genuine desire does not create instability. It creates clarity, even if things are still unfolding slowly. Another subtle sign lies in how predictable his emotional tone is. A man who wants you doesn't need to keep reinventing his approach. His greetings feel reliable. They may not always be intense, but they are emotionally steady. A narcissistic man, by contrast, often alternates between charm and detachment because he's responding to his own needs, not to the connection. If he feels admired, he leans in. If he feels secure, he pulls away. The greeting becomes a mirror of his ego, not his interest. This is where boundaries quietly begin, not through confrontation, but through awareness. When you notice inconsistency early, you don't have to explain it away. You don't need to wait and see while overriding your instincts. You simply take note. You slow your investment. You let behavior reveal itself over time. Boundaries are not about closing off. They're about pacing yourself according to reality, not hope. There's a philosophical maturity in this approach. It shifts you from asking, how can I get clarity from him, to asking, what is his behavior already showing me? That shift moves you out of emotional dependency and into self-leadership. You stop chasing coherence from someone who cannot provide it. And here's the empowering truth. Mixed signals are information. They are not puzzles to solve. They are patterns to observe. The moment you stop trying to decode inconsistency and start honoring it as data, its grip loosens. You regain emotional balance because you're no longer negotiating with ambiguity. So if a man's greeting leaves you unsettled more often than secure, don't rush to fix the feeling. Sit with it. Observe the pattern. Let consistency or the lack of it speak. Because clarity doesn't come from intensity, it comes from steadiness. And the moment you choose steadiness over confusion, you stop getting pulled into emotional loops and start aligning with relationships that can actually sustain you. By the time you reach this point, one truth should feel unmistakably clear. A greeting can spark awareness, but it should never decide your emotional investment. This is where everything comes together. The final and most empowering lesson is learning to trust patterns, not first impressions. Because while a greeting can open the door, it is consistency that tells you whether the room behind it is worth entering. First impressions are powerful because they activate emotion. A warm greeting can make you feel seen. A confident approach can feel magnetic. But emotion on its own is not evidence of intention. Narcissistic men often rely on first impressions precisely because they know how persuasive they can be. They create moments that linger in your mind, hoping those moments will outweigh the absence of follow-through. This is how illusion gains influence, through isolated highs that distract from long-term inconsistency. A man who genuinely wants a woman does not rely on moments. He builds momentum. His greetings align with his behavior over time. They are not followed by silence, withdrawal, or confusion. Instead, they are reinforced by effort, reliability, and respect. You don't feel like you're constantly recalibrating your expectations. You don't wonder where you stand. The connection may grow slowly, but it grows steadily. Psychologically, trusting patterns shifts you out of emotional reactivity and into grounded awareness. You stop assigning meaning to single interactions and start observing sequences. You notice whether his warmth is dependable, whether his attention remains present even when there is nothing to gain, whether his behavior stays consistent when the novelty fades. This is where truth lives, not in intensity, but in repetition. There's also a deeper philosophical shift here. When you trust patterns, you stop romanticizing potential and start respecting reality. You no longer ask who heck could be if things align. You focus on who highs as demonstrated through behavior. This protects you from investing in promises that never materialize and from bonding to versions of people that exist only in imagination. Trusting patterns also restores your sense of agency. You are no longer waiting for clarity to be handed to you. You are reading it in real time. You don't need reassurance, explanations, or closure conversations to justify stepping back. The behavior is the explanation. And when you accept that, decision-making becomes calmer, cleaner, and more self-respecting. This doesn't mean becoming guarded or cynical. It means becoming discerning. It means allowing yourself to enjoy connection while still staying rooted in observation. A greeting can be appreciated without being overvalued. Interest can be acknowledged without being chased. You remain open, but not unprotected. And here's the most empowering part. When you start trusting patterns, your standards rise. Naturally. You are no longer impressed by charm alone. You are moved by consistency. You are drawn to men who show up the same way twice, 10 times, and over time. That shift quietly changes everything about the relationships you attract and choose. So let this be the thought you leave with. A man who truly wants you won't rely on one perfect moment to hold your attention. He will show you again and again through steady presence and consistent behavior. And when you learn to trust that pattern, you stop chasing signals and start choosing clarity, confidence, and connection that can actually last.